Is this close enough? Can everyone in the back hear me okay? All right, amazing. Thank you, Christine. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, everyone. I'm incredibly honored to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to you today a little bit about the work I do over at the University of Illinois Chicago and with all of our working group partners in the Chicago-Calumet region. And so the focus of my presentation today is on the Growing Chicago Habitat Working Group, which focuses on working with different partners in the energy and transportation sector, as well as other stakeholders to create and connect habitat on rights of way and other lands in the Chicago wilderness region. And so I think for me, listening to all of the presentations that have come so far, a big takeaway in developing a plan to combat biodiversity and habitat loss in the Chicago-Calumet River region and the Chicago wilderness region at large is focusing on ways to collaborate with a wide variety of different folks and focusing on ways to create innovative conservation strategies. And so one opportunity that the work that I do at UIC focuses on in trying to do this is by identifying the opportunities that are available for habitat on rights of way. So energy and transportation lands, which can be areas under transmission lines, areas along roadsides and things like that. And so looking at the map that I have over here, there are thousands of miles of opportunities for creating habitat on rights of way. Oftentimes when these lands are managed just with sort of standard protocol in mind, these lands are often mowed and maintained in a state of early successional grassland habitat anyway. And so when habitat is prioritized in this, rights of way can both create and connect habitat across these many thousands of miles to connect the habitat that already exists and create new habitat that can provide value to the species that rely on those early succession grassland type habitats. And so in identifying this opportunity, what came out of this from UIC was the Rights of Way as Habitat Working Group formed in 2015. The overall goal of the working group is to work with energy and transportation professionals, as well as a variety of relevant stakeholders, including different nonprofits, technical experts, different agencies, with that overall goal of enhancing and expanding habitat across rights of way. Ultimately, we try to bring partners together who are interested in these goals with the idea that by skill sharing, being able to connect to one another, innovative solutions can be created to, again, find ways to address habitat fragmentation in partners who might not otherwise have been involved with conservation before. And so in order to facilitate this for our partners, one of the things that we try to offer folks is a variety of different resources for building this. And I think what's interesting is that resources can look like a lot of different things. Resources can look like what we're doing here today, to partners who are interested in discussing these issues. It can also look like a variety of different toolkits, resources, communications, and technical support opportunities as well. For today, what I want to focus on is the subset of our national working group, which is specifically focused on the Chicago wilderness region. There you go. Great. So Growing Chicago Habitat came out of a 2021 strategic survey with the larger working group, which identified that, we're based out of UIC. And so a lot of our partners do tend to be focused in the Midwest broadly, but also specifically in the, Chicago, Northwest Indiana, Southern Wisconsin region. And one of the things that our partners had identified is that having a local subset of the working group would be helpful for trying to tackle local initiatives. So, the working group broadly focuses on creating habitat for pollinators across rights of way, but what that habitat will look like obviously varies depending on the region that you're in. So the needs, for example, of our partners in the Southwest wouldn't match necessarily the needs of our partners in the Midwest. And even more specifically, the needs of folks who are in such a heavily urbanized environment like the Chicago wilderness region, which has its own unique legacy and unique ecosystems. It's helpful to have space for those partners to connect and share information. And so since this working group was started in 2022, we've expanded to over 62 partners who have started 30 habitat restoration projects since the inception. And together, different partners have collaborated on 8 different funded pursuits. all geared towards habitat restoration in the region. And one thing that I want to highlight before moving on from this, so shout out to the Field Museum for helping us develop this map, is that in the Chicago Wilderness region alone, there are 27,000 miles of rights of way that exist, which to me indicates that there's an opportunity again for that creation and connection of habitat. And the Chicago Wilderness region already has a lot of different natural areas, which all of you, I think, are tending to visit to, love, or in some way are involved with. And I think that in order to help facilitate spaces like that, in order to help expand habitat and reduce habitat fragmentation in the region, utilizing opportunities on rights of way can be a helpful, I think, opportunity to help make a more integrated landscape on the whole. And so this is one of my favorite slides that I have in here. And I think shout out to Kelvin Lindbergh, who always, thank you, who always supplies me with really lovely goat photos and most emails that we share. So yeah, I don't know if it shows up, but yes, one of my favorite photos, so thank you. But the overall goal, and I think the three pillars of Growing Chicago that we try to stick with, is focus on connecting partners and helping them forge collaborations and other partnerships with that overall goal of creating conservation efforts in the region. And so the main way that we try to connect partners is by hosting working group meetings, which we typically host twice a year, where we give partners the opportunity to connect with one another, share updates on projects they've been working on, maybe share new skills or new projects that they think would be relevant to other partners. And in following that, giving them a chance to collaborate and connect with each other on these opportunities as well. You know, I think that a lot of people have identified that, especially in the conservation world, nothing works well doing it alone, and a lot of people are doing similar work. And so finding ways to join efforts and maybe take that thing you're doing that is a hyper-local initiative and make it into something that can be more of a regional or landscape scale initiative, I think can be really powerful, can be really helpful for advancing the work that you're doing and expanding the scope of its impact. And so I think to speak to that, these are some of my favorite photos from Growing Chicago partners. So as I mentioned, ComEd, and their photo is right here. We have our partners in Northwest Indiana from NiSource, who are doing a lot on their transmission lines to create habitat. We have photos of milkweed here from Illinois as well. And so, like I was mentioning earlier, nothing works in a vacuum, and everything that people should be doing in conservation generally works the best when you can be doing it in alignment with larger goals for the region. And so to that end, Growing Chicago, while focused on rights of way, is involved with a number of different partnerships throughout the Chicago Wilderness region to try and support these partnerships where we can and bring in different connections and different way partners as we're able to do so. So some of the partnerships that we work with include the Chicago Wilderness Alliance, the Calumet Land Conservation Partnership, which was mentioned earlier, and the Northwest Indiana Urban Waters Federal Partnership. And so all of these partnerships, we try to support in the best way that we can, with the idea that, again, these groups are all focused on one similar goal, which is more biodiversity and more habitat connectivity in the region, and how rights of way in Growing Chicago support that in the best way that we can. And so one of the things that Growing Chicago has done, in addition to convening partners and connecting different partners on collaborative efforts, is we've tried to also develop tools. So similarly to what I was saying earlier about the larger working group, we offer chances for connection, but we also offer tools and resources to help actually make the habitat work happen. And so one of the tools that we have specific for Growing Chicago is a habitat prioritization tool and habitat prioritization strategy, which is kind of built into the same thing. And so Growing Chicago partnered with the Field Museum to help develop this GIS-based habitat prioritization tool, which ultimately focuses on what are the best spots to build habitat when considering the three factors listed here. So considering biodiversity, equity and environmental justice, and connectivity. Ultimately, all of these factors were picked because they both align with goals that different communities have identified and are in alignment with the regional goals identified with some of those partnerships that I had shown previously. And so in practice, this tool uses a combined index that identifies where rights of way exist in the Chicago Wilderness region and rank them based on areas of high opportunity or low opportunity for building habitat. So in the online version of the tool, if you're interested in only selecting for one particular filter of the tool, you're able to do that. So if you just wanted to focus on seeing where areas of high biodiversity, you could just click that factor. But if you're interested in considering that holistic picture, so where would be a good idea to build habitat based off of pre-existing biodiversity, areas for high connectivity potential, and high opportunity to address environmental injustices, you can select this combined index, and areas that are marked in blue, so this high opportunity, represent the most opportune areas to create habitat when considering all of those factors. And so one thing that I always think is, for me at least, I think is interesting to point out is that if you look at the map, and I know from the back it can be hard to see, but areas of high opportunity marked in dark blue tend to fall in the southeast side of the city and in northwestern Indiana. And so to me, I think that speaks to that those areas have a legacy of high industrial activity, but also have areas like the Indiana National Dunes Park. And so I think it's really interesting to try and use tools like this to consider strategic approaches to building habitat with the goal that hopefully building habitat in those dark blue areas with high opportunity will expand the areas that become high opportunity in the future. And so using this tool, which again, thank you to the Field Museum for helping us develop this, we were able to receive some funding from the Monarch Joint Venture, who was able to help us with, again, providing different information to try and locate underlying landowners in these areas of high opportunity. And so through the funding that they provided us, we identified 3 projects, one of which is with Shell in the city of Lockport, Illinois, right down there. Another in northwestern Indiana with NiSource down there. And the one that I want to focus on today, because it's a partnership with Friends of the Chicago River, is with ComEd and Friends of the Chicago River down in Riverdale, Illinois. Riverdale, Illinois, I know that a lot of you probably are familiar with the geography of the city, but just in case you're not, Riverdale, Illinois is an environmental justice community that is prone to severe flooding. So for those of you who were in the city in 2013 and remember the really severe flood disaster that hit the city, Riverdale was identified as one of the areas that was hit the hardest by this. And in coming out of this, there was a rain-ready Riverdale plan created that identified opportunities for nature-based solutions in cities and how that could help address some of these flooding issues in the future. And so this site was again identified in that rain-ready Riverdale plan. It is a ComEd right-of-way. And so UIC partnered with Friends of Chicago River, ComEd, and Stantec to try and develop a proposal for what that site could look like when considering both the opportunity to build habitat and also to improve some of the flood issues that were hitting Riverdale over time. And so to this end, we all partnered to apply for a grant through the National Coastal Resiliency Fund with the idea that you could create habitat along these particular rights of way, which also border a school. And so there was opportunity there as well to create a space that was multi-use in the sense of it could potentially have a walking path for students, different educational opportunities, while again providing that nature-based solution in the form of stormwater mitigation. Ultimately, the grant that we put forward was not selected for funding, but ComEd has done a really incredible job along with Stantec and is still continuing to work on this site so far. And so 15 acres of the site will be seeded by the end of 2025 in a beekeeping and honey making workshop was hosted earlier this year, along with the Riverdale Public Library. Some of the hives are located on ComEd lands. And ultimately, long-term plans to the site include ways to factor in education and other opportunities related to that into the site and into the stewardship of the site. So with that, I just want to leave any remaining time to make sure we're on time, but thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you're interested in learning more, getting involved with Growing Chicago, feel free to find me after, and I'm always happy to talk. And again, thank you to the Growing Chicago partners in the room. You really do an incredible job, and all of this work wouldn't happen without you. So thank you. Questions or
Right.
yes.
Yes, just wondering about, funding the actual implementation of some of these identified project priorities. You mentioned that the NCRF grant didn't come through, so it sounds like in some of these circumstances, some of the transportation or energy companies are stepping up and funding this work themselves. Can you just speak more on the opportunities with that, some of the challenges, like do these companies, are they building support within their own like management to take on more of this work, or is that just a slow process?
Yeah, so it's I think that there's one program we do in particular that I didn't speak to, but I think addresses as well. We have a program that the UIC Update Working Group organizes called the Monarch Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances, or CCAA, which in a nutshell, for partners who commit voluntarily, energy and transportation organizations, to doing conservation work for monarchs on their rights of way. In the event that the monarch butterfly is listed under the Endangered Species Act, they'll have improved regulatory processing and permitting because they're doing the conservation effort ahead of time to again commit that conservation effort towards. And so, in that example of a program, it's helpful for the company to put forward the effort to do the conservation initiatives ahead of time, because in the long run, it can save them a lot of money on regulatory permitting and things like that. And I also think that for a lot of the companies, and I also want to acknowledge that partners in the room could speak to this more than I could, but I think that a lot of companies are building it into their culture more. Doing vegetation management with habitat in mind ultimately saves partners money in the long run in a lot of cases. It reduces the need to be mowing constantly when you can be on a large-term habitat schedule. And again, I think that there's benefit, I think, that a lot of companies find in working with their communities and trying to have community buy-in for the way that they manage, rather than just kind of managing in the way that's always been done. So at least from the companies that we work with, I think that we work with a lot of people who are really dedicated to trying to make those shifts happen internally, and it's really encouraging to see, at least from my perspective.